Welcome to a Backyard Ultra podcast. In this podcast, I caught up with Scott Snell, who was a member of Team USA in the recent Satellite Backyard Ultra World Championships. We talked everything Backyard Ultras, his performance at Bigs, and how he made the team. It's a really good chat. I think you'll enjoy it. Here you go. Okay, g'day Scott. How you going?
Hey, good. How are you doing?
Yeah, really good. Thanks for joining the podcast today.
Yeah, happy to be here. It's exciting.
No worries. So I thought maybe we would just start off simple and just ask, how did your running journey begin?
Yeah. I mean, it started. It mostly started when I first met my wife, and she was a runner. I wasn't a runner at the time, but she was a runner, and so it's kind of an excuse to spend more time with her, I think. So I kind of took up running, and I kind of took off on my own and just kind of fell in love with it myself to even more, maybe even more so than her at some point. Because I mean, she's a good runner, and she's done a marathon, but she's never ventured beyond the marathon distance. So I guess I've kind of like pushed the limit as far as distances between the two of us, but yeah, she really was the one who introduced me to running. So I have her to blame for when I disappear for long runs and she complains about it.
I think I read in one of your blogs, or you mentioned in one of your blogs, when you started running, it also correlated with you quitting smoking too. So
yeah, that was part of it. I was a smoker prior to when I started running, I was a smoker. But yeah, and that kind of coincided at the same time. I was like trying to quit smoking, and it really wasn't working or going well. I mean, I quit a bunch of times and restarted a bunch of times until I finally just I hit this point where I decided to quit, every time I have a craving for a cigarette, instead of having a cigarette, I'm just going to go run a mile or go run around the block or something, just whatever, just go out and get some distance in. And I think that's what really finally got me to kick the habit for good was replacing it with another addiction.
So how long ago was this? How old were you when you started running about?
So that was about 20 years ago. It was like my early 20s that when I met my wife and picked up running. And I'm 42 now. So it's been about 20 years that I started running for the sake of running. I mean, prior to that, I wasn't athletic at all in my college days, but when I was younger, up through high school, I played quite a bit of soccer. So there's a decent amount of running there, but I never ran for the sake of running. It was just because running was part of soccer, I ran.
Yeah. Well, they're pretty fit, those soccer players. They run.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, they run some distance during each game. So, yeah, I mean, when I was doing it, it was I never really enjoyed running while playing soccer, but it wasn't until after I went through some time of being very unathletic and unhealthy that I decided that running was my passion.
And how long after you started running did you realize that you wanted to run far and run ultras?
Yeah, it took a while, because I mean, when I started, I was doing I remember the first time I ran a half marathon distance, and when I did that, I was like, wow, that's really far. That was crazy. And I did it on my own. I was just out for a run, and I just kept going at one point, and I was at the 10-mile mark. It's oh man, I might be able to do a half marathon at this point. So I did that, and I really impressed myself at that time. And so that's when I first even started entertaining the idea of shooting for trying to do a marathon. And so that was I'd been running for a few years before that, and then I think it was a few years later, in 2009, was the first marathon that I ran. So that was at least probably 6 years after I started just running as a pastime. And then it wasn't until 2015 that I ran my first ultra, which is a 50K. So it's somewhere between that marathon in 2015 when I kind of decided, well, what's after a marathon? What's the next distance to try and tackle? And it took a few years before I even really like decided I wanted to do more than a marathon. It took a few years and reading a couple of Dean Karnazes books before I was like, yeah, I want to go see if I can do an ultra.
Yeah. And I noticed that it was around, you'll probably help me with this, but you figured out not long after you ran your first ultra or something, you had an issue with your hip and you needed surgery.
Yeah, it was actually before my first ultra. It was 2013, so it was like a couple years before my first ultra. That was when I decided I wanted to try and do a 50K. So I was like trying to build up mileage, and that's when I just started having this like nagging hip pain. It was terrible, and it's like every run it was really bad, and I would like hobble for a couple days after every run, and I was just like, there's something wrong here. There's something going on, and so I finally went and got it checked out, and it was like all this after like x-rays and everything, you know, they finally like the doctors they figured out, you know, it was my labrum in my right hip was all messed up, and it wasn't until after the surgery that the surgeon he gave me more of a description of what was going on in there, and after he looked at it and everything and got it fixed, he was like, well, your cartilage was basically shredded. So they took out all the shredded cartilage, and he said ultimately it was caused by a bone spur on that side, which caused like some kind of like cyst to form, which developed a one-way valve, and so it messed up my whole hip and shredded the cartilage. So he removed the cartilage and the bone spur, and that was in 2013. And 2014 was basically like just trying to rebuild mileage and, you know, feel comfortable running again.
Yeah.
And then 2015, it wasn't until October 2015 that I ran that 50K. And from there, it's been good. So, I mean,
so you must have been determined, because a lot of having surgery and having a break, that would have been easy to just like, I don't know, just form new habits and just not start running again. But you must have had it like firmly set in your mind you wanted to be an ultra runner.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a major goal for me. It was something I wanted to do, and yeah, like, I mean, it would have been a really easy excuse to just say, yeah, well, I guess running's not for me. Yeah. You know, yeah. I mean, so someone's trying to tell me something here. My body just said no. It would have been the easiest way to get out of doing any running at all. So yeah, I guess I really wanted to do it. But it was I mean, thankfully, I think one of the questions I asked to the surgeon that I think kind of like helped even motivate me more and not give up was, you know, since it happened on one hip, I was questioning, well, if it's from my bone structure, you know, is it going to happen on my left hip in another 1 to 2 years or whatever? And, you know, the answer he gave me was that since it was caused by the bone spur and my hip structure was different, like it didn't have that bone spur on both sides. And, he kind of like just was assuming that bone spur was somehow caused by like a previous injury that probably happened somewhere, like could have been 10 years ago prior to all the other issues that were like a chain reaction developing. So that's what kind of like gave me a little bit more motivation to not just say, okay, well, it's not my body, it's because of some accident or something or some previous injury that I might have not even remember happening that kind of like caused the whole issue.
Yeah. Is that something that you draw strength on? Like when an ultra gets hard, you think back to the surgery and it kind of like comes in?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's one thing that I kind of fall back on, like, because I mean, we've all been there before. Like everyone who's running an ultra has been at like hit a low point at some point during a race, and I know everyone has like their own history and experiences that they kind of turn to and draw to, and yeah, that's one for me. I mean, among others, but that's one where it's like, well, you know, if I can start from zero and, you know, hit that roadblock before I even like made it to my first ultra. I mean, that's something that I can like go back and look at and be like, well, this, whatever situation I'm in right now, like feels like my quads are blown up or whatever, or my stomach doesn't feel good. It's like one of those things where you just be like, okay, well, I got through that, and that was a year of literally a full year of rebuilding.
Yeah.
That this, whatever, if it's a few more hours of pain and not not actually wanting to do this, I can get through it. So
yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. And so you've been running ultras for a few years, till you ran your first backyard ultra. I know they're kind of a new format, but what attracted you to running of your first backyard ultra?
I think it's mainly just like curious about the format, because it's so different than your standard point to point ultra. It's just like rather like, because I always went into ultras like it, the goal is to do it as fast as possible, and I'm not like that fast of a runner. If there's in most point to point races, I mean, I'm not going to be competitive unless it's a very small race that's non-competitive. Then I might have a chance being somewhere near the front. But I mean, if it's a competitive race, I mean, I'm usually like a middle of the packer in most races. So backyard ultras were like something completely different though, because they take that whole speed issue out of it, and it really levels the playing field. And so it's like, well, then it comes down to like, if everyone's fit enough to do this 4.167 mile loop every hour on the hour without feeling completely exhausted, then it just comes down to, well, who can keep doing it long enough and manage all the other things that are going on with calories and sleep. And and the mental game is like so different. And so that, I'd say, it was like just the curiosity of seeing like, what does it really feel like to push for that far and that long? That's what really drew me to it.
Yeah. And you obviously think pretty deeply about backyard ultras, because you post some pretty cool stuff. Like one of the posts on Instagram, I'm not sure if it was something you came up with, but when you're in a backyard ultra, like as long as you're still going, you're on actually
Right.
on world record pace.
Right. Yeah, I did come up with that, but I gotta admit it's kind of stolen from something that Laz said, because
Right.
he said you're always tied for first place, and I was thinking about that one time when I'm running. It was like, well, yeah, you're tied for first, but at the same time you're also on world record pace the whole time, because it doesn't matter, as long as you're in the race, you're still on the pace that you need to do to set a new world record. So it's kind of like, it's like it was mind blowing when I did it. I mean, when I thought of it, outrunning, but a lot of things seem mind blowing when you're like out running for long runs, and then you get back, you're like, it wasn't so mind blowing.
Yeah,
But but I don't know. I thought that one was good enough that I remembered it and put it out there. So
yeah, it's beautiful.
But yeah, I mean, it's and that's part of the format that just like is so intriguing, is how everyone kind of runs together. No one can break away from the pack.
Yeah. And you won your first backyard ultra, and you won your second, and you won your third. I wouldn't mind just talking about the first two. You won your first one in 36 hours, I believe.
The first one was Run Ragged in Connecticut.
Right.
And that one was, I think it went 30 or 31 hours. It was somewhere in there. But it was a little bit different than your standard backyard, because it was like a tougher course, more technical, more elevation change. And it was only like, I think, about a 5K loop.
Right. Yeah.
So the 30 or 31 hours came out to like 99 miles. So a little less mileage, but I mean, you can make a case either way, that that's, I think it depends on the runner. I mean, like if you like technical and elevation change, it's probably great for you, but otherwise some other runners, it might have been a nightmare. They might have preferred, having the 4.167 mile loop on an easier course. But I don't know, I like the technical stuff, and I like elevation change. So I mean, I enjoyed it. It's just for my first backyard, it's kind of like there's an asterisk next to that one, just because it's not a full, the standard distance.
Yeah. And so you must have, so, and then you won Backyard Squatch and Keystone.
Yeah, yeah. Keystone was Pennsylvania's first backyard. I mean, first official backyard, and Backyard Squatch was New Jersey's first official backyard. And so, I mean, since I'm from New Jersey, that was like almost a no-brainer that I had to like try and sign. I mean, and the timing just worked out really well for me. So that was like I really was happy to be able to run that one, and it went really well. So I was even happier that I made it.
And seeing as though you were the last one standing at both of those, did you feel like, were you thinking this is easy? I could have done like 24 more hours, or were you pretty exhausted, or how did you feel?
Well, I don't know. I think there's something weird about backyards where when you are the last one standing, after you go back and you think about it, yeah, it seems like it was easy, but I think when you're in the moment, it's not that easy.
Yeah.
And I think it's just like, if you were the last one standing, though, I think you kind of like remember the easier parts and less of the tough parts, less of the pain and all the times you thought about quitting. So, I mean, and that's where going into bigs, like afterwards, it feels so different now. Because like I'm remembering all the mistakes I made and all the things that didn't go well. Whereas like past backyards where I was the last person standing, it's like, well, I remember all the really things that went really well and how great it was. I just forget about all the bad stuff.
Yeah.
Just erase that and go do it again somewhere else.
Yeah. And in one of your blogs leading up to Capital Backyard Ultra, which you were also the last one standing, you seemed like you were really confident and really determined to make Team USA for the Satellite World Champs, and you ran 62 hours to do that, which is almost double what your previous best was. How did you manage? Like, how did you do it? Like, did you expect to run that far, or?
I'd say I was expecting it to go over 200 at Capital, so I wasn't surprised it went over 200. I was a little surprised how many runners were still in it going into that second night, and that was my lowest point at Capital. I'd say is because I mean my goal there was to get that. Since it was a silver ticket race, my goal was to get that silver ticket and have my guaranteed spot at Bigs for the Team USA Backyard World Championship. Because I mean that was my number one goal for the year, was to get a spot on the team. And so that was my best ticket to get there, was winning that silver ticket race. So yeah, I mean I was just like I was super determined, and I was like all in on being the last person standing there. So, I mean, I was very determined, and it was, and I knew it was going to go far. I expected it to go over 200, and I looked at the list of runners there. A lot of talent and a lot of runners that had gone over 200. So, I mean, I wasn't shocked that it was going over 200, but the number of runners going into that second night, I thought we'd be down to a handful of runners, and I think we still had. I don't know what the number was, but it's probably over like, I think we probably had like 12 to 15 runners going out on the road course again, going to the second night. Mm-hmm. And that was the most discouraging part for me, just how many people were still going into the second night. Because when I did Backyard Squatch, it was me and one other guy going into the second night, and he only stuck around for a few night laps, and then it was over. And that race, I was like, really pumped to be running through the second night. I was excited for it because I'd never done that before. Mm-hmm. And then at Capital, I was like, as soon as it happened, and I was like, oh yeah, we're definitely going through a full second night. I was like, this is not cool. This is very discouraging that there's still this many people, and we're definitely going through this night, and I don't know what's going to happen. So that was my lowest point of the race. But I actually, that's one of the times that I called my wife as like my last resort way to avoid quitting. Yeah. And I told her, look, I think I'm done. I think I'm going to quit. I don't think I have a chance of winning. And she straightened me out. She said, no, you just keep going. Chug a can of. I always bring like some iced coffees. So she was like, just chug a can of iced coffee and keep going, and you'll bounce back. Just keep going. So I did that, and it worked out for me there. So, I mean, that was one of the times, like one of those low points, like you hit the low points, but I mean, that time I made it through the other side and came back. So not that it was easy though. I mean, there were some low points over that night where I was like, I was tired and sleep deprived, but made it through the night. So.
And was that far from where you lived? Did you have to travel far to get to that one?
It's just south of Washington, D.C. So for me from home, I think is about a 5-hour drive. So not terrible, but a little away from home. And
I'm not sure if I misunderstood it or not, but did you do that race without a crew?
Yeah. So I showed up by myself, no crew. But I mean, it's a really well supported race.
Right.
The RD there, Sarah, she's got a couple really good cooks, and one of them is a former White House chef, and they make some amazing food there, and they take care of you. Great volunteer support. So I was pretty much on my own the first 2 days, I'd say, and through the second night, and then it was during that second night I asked for help from a couple volunteers during the second night when I wanted to try and sneak a little nap in. And I was really worried about not waking up when the whistle blew. So I asked a couple volunteers, just to make sure I'm awake if I'm still sleeping on my cot when the whistle blows. And so they helped me out that night to make sure I wasn't going to sleep through the whistles. And then it was during the third day, I just started getting help from race volunteers, and there were a couple of runners that had finished their race and hung out to help out other runners. So I mean, that's that third day, I was getting quite a bit of help, and especially that's where I met actually Dagmar was one of the runners who was at the race, and she ended up crewing for me at Biggs. And she was one of the runners that she was a local runner there who stuck around and helped out other runners after she finished her race. And so that really just worked out great that I met her there, and she offered to crew for me when I went to Biggs. So really grateful that I was able to meet her, and she was so helpful.
Yeah, awesome. So I think sleep is probably the biggest factor that catches runners out the deeper you go. So do you find it easy to sleep between loops?
I've had mixed results. Capital, I felt good, and things didn't go as well at Biggs as far as sleep. At Capital, I don't think I slept at all the first night. I just closed my eyes a few times, but I didn't sleep at all. And then the second night, it wasn't until I think it was the 4 a.m. loop that I decided I was going to pick up the pace and make a little extra time to actually close my eyes and try and nap. And I got about a good 10-minute nap in just before the loop where the sun was coming up. And I felt so refreshed after that 10-minute nap at Capitol. And then the sun came up, and I was set for day 3, and I felt great. And at Biggs, I tried multiple times to sleep and picked up the pace to try and get that little extra time so you can get a good 5 to 10-minute nap. And I never got that feeling that I think I dozed off a few times, but I never got the feeling that I was well rested when the whistles blew again. And the sleep deprivation, it seemed worse to me at Biggs than it did at Capitol for whatever reason. So yeah, it didn't, the sleeping did not go as well for me at Biggs as it did Capitol.
Yeah. You mentioned you drank a caffeine drink. Is that something one of your strategies as well, drink an energy drink or caffeine, coffee during the race?
Yeah. I use a lot a lot of coffee, like iced coffee, hot coffee. Well, at Capitol I was just doing iced coffee, but at Biggs I was doing hot coffee. And then we also, like, all the crew members, we were like all the crew members at Biggs were trading goods and like supplying each other, so the runners could like have more variety and try new things if something wasn't working for them. And one of the things we got there was I'm not sure who brought it, but we got a hold of some caffeinated chocolates, and so I was eating those too on the runs. And I always bring chocolate covered espresso beans. Oh. And I'll usually munch on those overnight if I'm like feeling really drowsy and need a little boost.
Yeah. So you won Capitol with 61 yards, and you got your ticket to Biggs. And I think you were the 4th seed, weren't you?
Yeah. Yep. 4th seed.
You must have been absolutely wrapped.
Yeah. It was pretty. It was shocking. Yeah. I mean, like, especially like looking at the other team members there. I mean, seeing like Harvey Lewis on there, like, be like, oh, I get to say Harvey Lewis is my teammate. I mean, that's pretty cool. I mean, a little shocking to be honest. So,
well, we to make Team USA, especially with the population as big as America, it's a massive achievement.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I guess with the population, but then I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure what percentage of the population is even aware of backyard ultras. So that might be here or there. It seems to be taking off in Australia, though. I mean, I've seen a lot of new backyard races popping up in Australia. So.
Well, there's one in Western Australia next year called Hurdies, and they're going to break the record for the most runners in a backyard ultra. They're 300. Cool. 300.
Wow. Yeah. That's a huge field.
Yeah.
That's going to be a crowded 4-mile course.
Yeah. So they're really, really taking off. Everyone who's running ultras are running backyard ultras as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And I saw there's one coming up early next year. It's kind of like the Backyard Masters. I think they're kind of hyping it up as. I can't remember exactly what the name of it is.
Yeah, you're right. The Backyard Masters, and that one's in Queensland, which is north of where I am. Harvey Lewis is actually going to it.
Right. Yeah. I think he was like the first American on the list of runners there.
Yeah. So a lot of all the Australians who can get in, they're all doing it because it's going to be an awesome field, and everyone wants to run for as long as they can. It's going to be. Right. I'm hoping to make it. You got to run at least 24 hours to be able to make the field, and I've done my best is 22, but I've got a backyard ultra in Feb, so my goal is to make the
push a few more yards in there.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I'll probably be following along from the States here.
Yeah. So what's the course at Biggs like? I understand there's a night and day course. Yeah, it's probably outside of the 5K course that I did in Connecticut. It's probably the toughest backyard course I've been on. Really? It's definitely it's not as technical as the Run Ragged course I did in Connecticut, but it's not far off from that one as far as like rocks and roots, and it's got a decent amount of elevation change. I think it's somewhere around 470 feet of gain per lap. Yeah, and so I mean, Capitol had it was somewhere between like 300 to 350 at Capitol, which seemed like a decent amount. I mean, when you're doing that same loop so many times. But like, yeah, you add another over 100 feet every lap. I mean, it starts to add up. So I was feeling the elevation change from the course at Biggs, and definitely was more worried about tripping and catching a toe on rocks and roots there than I was at Capitol. Because Capitol, it's a lot of it is just like a crushed stone trail course. There's a little bit of single track. I mean, I'd say maybe about half of the trail course is single track and half is more like a crushed stone type thing. Yeah. So that was all just like really smooth and easy runnable.
But yeah, there's definitely some sections at Biggs where it's like, yeah, this is a real trail course. I mean, it's not just like you can turn your brain off and just mindlessly run. You got to really like watch your footing and make sure you're not going to trip.
Yeah. Is the night course similar to that, or is that a bit easier?
The night course was easy. I mean, it was all road. The worst part of the night course was Laz's driveway.
Right.
It's some pretty big stones there that are kind of sharp, and yeah, you start feeling those after a few days through your shoes. But once you got on the road, I mean, it was nice. And there's a couple hills there, but nothing like steep. I mean, it's all really runnable. But I mean, after you get a couple 100 miles on your legs, those hills do feel more like hills. So I was walking them that second. I was walking a lot of the hills on the road the second night, but otherwise, yeah, the road course is pretty mild compared to the day course.
Yeah. And were you getting, like, during the Satellite World Championships, were you getting regular updates about how Team USA is going and what's happening in the other countries and stuff like that?
Not a whole lot. I mean, I kind of felt like we were a little bit in the dark there, and I don't know if that was Laz is such a character that like he's kind of like got this whole image of being like the evil genius or whatever, and so I kind of like was questioning it. Is like part of his like team strategy to not tell us what's going on, because like if we found out, yeah, we got whatever, like 3 runners more than any other country, and we're up whatever 20 some yards or like whatever, make up a number, then it's like, well, that would kind of almost like give someone like the feeling that, hey, it's okay if I quit now, because our team has 3 more runners than any other country. We're up 40 yards. There's no way they're going to catch up. And so I kind of was like going back and forth at the time. I was like, well, maybe we're not getting updates as it's like kind of like he thinks we'll all perform better if we don't know if we're in the lead. But even when we had lost a runner, I think we lost a runner earlier than I know Belgium, at least. And like we were hearing that we were down 1 runner, and I think that kept a few members of our team in longer than they would have been otherwise, because we had a few that were hurting pretty bad, somewhere between that 24 to 48 hour mark, and they struggled on through some tough stuff, just to build up a few more yards for us, somewhere between that 24 to 48 hour period.
Yeah. So obviously you ran 62 yards, which is awesome. How did you feel at the end of it? Like, were you happy?
I wasn't happy at the end. I mean, I was happy to not be in the race anymore. So, I mean, but it was really mixed emotions. I mean, I had like some really high hopes going into the race. I mean, I definitely wanted to go through a third night there, and I was expecting to go through a third night, and after that I was like, all bets are off, because I mean that's whole new territory for me to make it through a third night. But I mean that was like kind of like the base of what I was shooting for, was because I knew the race. I knew at least a few of the runners were going to go through a third night there. With you looked at our team, it's like, yeah, someone's going to go over 300 here, or at least 2 people are going over 300. And I was like, I really want to be in that group that goes into a 4th day. And I don't know, things went kind of south for me somewhere during that 3rd day, and then it just all really fell apart really quickly that 3rd night. And so I wasn't happy how it ended, and I wasn't really I was just really, I mean, of course, disappointed when your race ends. So it was a tough one to take, but at the same time I was just so like mentally done at that point. I wasn't that upset at the time. It was more like it was regret later. I mean, at the time it wasn't like I was happy to be done at the time, but then the next morning I was like, oh man, what did I do to mess this up so bad? Yeah. And so it was, and even in the moment, I knew the regret was going to be there after I took a nap and I woke up. I knew there was going to be regret, but it's just like I was so like mentally cooked at that point. I was just like, I was done, and just the body. I was having this issue with my legs were just feeling really achy and tough to start moving. Every time I laid down to try and get some sleep, it was just like getting them moving was really tough. And it was like mentally just had to like, I couldn't just like mentally be like, okay, time to start running. And the legs are moving. It was like, okay, right leg, move it, left leg, right. And like telling that until it would just like kind of pick up running. And all that I just remember that last night loop when I tried to go again. It was like every time I like started running, if I didn't like mentally like think about each leg moving, it was like I just reverted back to like this like shuffling walk. It's just like, oh crap, I gotta run here. I'm not gonna make it if I don't run. Yeah, it just like it fell apart.
Yeah. Have you sort of had to think about what caused that, like why it happened, or you're not? It's just one of those things.
I think there's a lot of things that added up to it. I mean, I was my biggest excuse that I'm using is that I call it an excuse. I'm sure it was one factor, but I was getting over a cold leading up to the race. My son came down with a cold like 2 weeks before the race, I think, and then I think I picked it up about a week before the race. And I was still like somewhat congested and hacking up some phlegm and stuff going into the race. And we stopped at a CVS on our way to Tennessee so I could pick up more cough drops, and just because I was like still hacking so bad. So it was like all that going into it. I like knew I wasn't in 100%, like I wasn't 100% recovered from that cold. So that was like a mental challenge going into it. So that was like one part of it, but then it's just like the sleep deprivation really got to me at Biggs more so than at Capital. And I think that was like just a big part of like being defeated mentally, is like I just was like just so exhausted and sleep deprived. I was just like I can't do this anymore. And I went back and forth, like I think I went back and forth a few times during that third day, just saying like telling my crew that I'm just like, I think I'm done. I don't think I can do this anymore. And, to my crew's credit, I mean, Dagmar, she kept me going out there, and she kept on giving me motivational talks. And it's like, so I made it through the third day without that much trouble. But then it was like towards the end when it got to be night, I just like that third night was like I was cooked, and I was done, and the temperature drop I think kind of added to it too, because the last couple laps got really chilly. After the first 2 nights were like beautiful, like warm. I mean, not warm, but just like beautiful running temperature. And then that third night it got windy and cold, and I'm not really a big fan of like cold weather running anyway. So I was just like, at that point, I was like, I can't keep going. And I shut down.
Yeah. And were you hallucinating as well? Or
I've never really, I never had like what I would like really say is a full on hallucination. I mean, I've had it like mostly I had it happen at Capital and at Biggs. But it's just like, where shadow, like you look at a shadow and you're like, oh, that kind of looks like whatever, like a dog over there, or that looks like I thought that was a squirrel. And it's just like random stuff, like seeing like faces in the shadows and it's like it's like maybe a mild like semi hallucination, but I've never like had that full on like where, oh, I think there's actually something there. Just kind of that shadow kind of looks like something else.
Yeah. And the Biggs course that you ran on last, is that exactly the same course that the individual championships are going to be run on next year?
Yes, I'm pretty sure it's the same course that they use for individual and the world championship. So yeah. And I think they also do. I think Laz also does. He does he does. I mean, it was just Big's backyard, and then it turned into the world championships with the team competitions. And I'm not sure when he started it, but he also does a Little's backyard, because the I don't know, like the Big's backyard is named after his dog, and one of his dogs is Big's, and then I think he's got another dog, so he did a second race, and it's the same course, backyard format, but he calls it Little's, and it's less. There's not a. I mean, it's just a open registration, so you don't have to like have a whatever backyard resume. Anybody could just register and run a backyard, and that way they can build up and earn a spot at the Big's backyard. So it's cool, because it's like it's open to anyone who wants to give it a shot, and anyone can run it. So anyone can run the course there too, by signing up for Big or for Littles.
So there was obviously, like, you've had a massive build up to running at Bigs and making the team. It sounds like it was a process of at least about 12 months of being your main running focus. So when it finished, how did you feel? Was it like, did you know what you're going to do next, or was it kind of like, I'm going to have a rest now? Or
yeah, well, the plan was to rest. Yeah, I mean, it was because it was a big build up. I think I originally applied to try and run at Bigs. I think it was in 2019, and I actually got an email from Laz for the 2020 team, because they had some team members drop short notice. So it was like the week of the 2020 race. The next 5 people on the list that had applied for the team got an email from Laz saying, whoever is available that can make it to the race this weekend, the spot's yours if you reply back. And I think I waited till the next day to reply, and the spot was gone. So like, it was like I almost had a spot in 2020, which would have been really cool. But then at the same time, I was like, well, that's not really how I want to get my spot at Bigs. Is like, I want to feel like I earned it in some way. So I'm glad I didn't get that spot that year, and I got it in 2022 the way I did by going to Capital and getting the silver ticket, because that way I felt like I really had earned my spot there. But yeah, so I mean, this whole year though, the goal was to get the spot on the team and then do as much as I can there. And then after that, I was like, okay, I'm going to pretty much shut it down for the year and take some time off, recover, and rest a little. And that's really the plan now until I figure out what I'm going to do next year. And I've got a couple ideas.
You definitely had an awesome tour. Like, you've done 61 and 62 yards in your life. There's only be a handful of people in the world who could say that they've run over 60 yards in their last 2 backyard ultras.
Right. Yeah. And it's, I'd wanted to do a 200 miler for a few years. I mean, I kind of like was toying with the idea of like doing a 200 miler. And so when Capital turned into a 200 mile, I was like, all right, well, that's cool. I got my first 200 miler in without signing up for a 200 miler. And I was like, I know Biggs is going to go 200 again. So yeah, it's like I for a few years, I'd wanted to do a 200, and I got 2 200s in this year, over 200s in. So I mean, it's a year. It's a year to be proud of, regardless of how whether I'm disappointed with Biggs or not. It still was a good year.
Yeah, for sure. And that 62 yards, that would probably qualify you to run in the championships next year if you wanted to.
It's close. I know the last time I checked, I think so there's, I think 75 spots available. And with the 35 countries that all the winners have a spot, if they all take their spot, that puts me, I think, at like 58th on the list for the at large. So I've got I've got a little bit of a cushion where I'm at right now to have a spot at Biggs for next year at the individuals.
Yeah. And you're keen to do that if you do make the team, or are you still not sure?
I'm more I'm more apt to do it now than I was when I was actually running at Bigs. When I was running at Bigs, I was like, man, I don't want to do this again. And I think the thing I really didn't like about it, or I was like thinking I'm not going to do it when I was there. I was like, man, there's only 15 of us here, and this feels a little bit crowded. What's it going to be like with 75 runners here?
Yeah.
But now, after I've it's a month removed now, and I've kind of looked at it a little bit more and thought about it more. I'm like, yeah, I really feel like I could have done better there. Few things had gone better. Maybe I'd done a couple things differently before things went bad. So I think I could improve on what I did there. So that motivates me more to go back.
Yeah, and because you've earned your spot, you don't have to worry about the pressure of making the team either. So you've got more time to refresh and, like, I don't know, do what you want to do as far as other races go.
Right. Yeah. And so that's kind of like what I'm figuring out now is like what I'm going to do next year. Cause there's, I mean, I think I'm pretty safe to have that spot, but you never know what's going to happen. I mean, worldwide with all these other big backyards that are coming up. I know there's the big one in Germany, the Backyard Masters in Germany. I think that's going to put up some big numbers. There's probably going to be at least a handful of runners there who could earn a spot just based on with their at-large entry based on what they do there. So I mean, there's a chance I'll get bumped off the list depending on what happens at all these other backyards. So I am thinking about that, and so I'm not definite yet, but I'm kind of looking at doing Capital again next year, just because that'd be an opportunity to put up a bigger number of yards and guarantee, or at least have a better shot at a spot at Bigs next year.
Yeah, and now that 100 has been shown it can be done, is 100 yards on your radar?
Oh man, I don't know. That's another level. I mean, I felt really good at Capital going into the third night, but at that point it was me and one other runner. So I was like, this is like, I was like super pumped. I think that's just kind of like part of it's like with backyards, it's such a mental game, because it was the same with me at Backyard Squatch. When it was me and one other runner going into the second night, I was like excited and pumped going to the second night. And at Capital, it was the third night, me and one other runner, and it ended on that first night loop. So I didn't get the chance to try and make it through a third night. And then at Biggs, that chance was there, and it was just, I don't know, I was like in a different mental state, and I was just like kind of cooked at that point. So I think I know I've got it in me to make it through a third night. So that's really the goal. And then, well, I mean, if you made it through a third night, yeah, why not a fourth night? So 100 is, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'd like to be able to say that I think I can do it, but I mean, I think everything's got to go right. And but those guys, they were on a different level, what they were doing there than what I've ever accomplished.
You mentioned in one of your posts on Instagram recently, I think it was, that when you were running in the high 50s, you're kind of thinking about you're running around the same numbers that you imagined your idols, like Courtney Dauwalter and Harvey Lewis, and like you were mentioning how it was a kind of like a weird but cool kind of feeling. Can you tell me about that a little bit?
Yeah, it really is, because like that, I mean, that's kind of part of what attracted me to the backyards was when I saw, like, I think really, at least as far as for me, I mean, I started paying more attention to backyards when I saw like Courtney battling it out with Harvey Lewis, and it was like just like amazing. And like, I've been a fan of hers and Harvey Lewis for years now. And then you saw like Maggie Gutierrez, battling it out at Biggs. I mean, and so like all that's like really like inspiring stuff to like watch those competitions play out. And so like when I got into the situation like of like being on the same running those numbers of yards. I mean, it's like, yeah, I was like, it was beyond anything that I thought I was capable of when I was watching them do it. So it's kind of like, it's kind of a surreal experience when you find yourself doing it. And like in the moment, I mean, like when I was running Capital in the moment, it didn't seem like I was doing anything that felt amazing. But when I went back and looked at it, I was like, oh yeah, well, those are the number of yards that someone won bigs with less yards than that.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, but that just kind of like shows how much this format has advanced in the last few years and how much the envelope's been pushed. Because I mean, I don't think anyone's going to win bigs with under 300 from here on going forward, unless like there's like some kind of weather issue or something going on. But otherwise, I mean, I think if conditions are decent, no one's going to win bigs under 300. I mean, I think this a standard's been set.
Where does your mental toughness come from? Have you always had it, or did you get into ultras to build mental toughness?
I don't know. I mean, I think I've always been kind of. I'd like to say I've always been mentally tough. I don't know, but I don't know. I think with backyards, like it's almost like the most. You could almost say it's like the most stubborn person is the best fit to run a backyard, because at some point it's like, you realize like, what am I doing here? And like, we're all in pain, and I mean, I know that they're all in pain. They can't not be in pain, but it's just refusal to quit, and I think that's what really like. It's like so much about like your spirit more so than like your physical capability. Because if you take two people that are like, equal physically fit, and they can both do this course however many times, it's like, well, at some point it just comes down to like, who wants it more, who wants it better. And you hear that in sports all the time, like, oh, this is going to go to whoever wants it the most. And it's like, you hear it in football games and everything else. It's like, yeah, that's part of it, but you know what, the other team had some really good players that they just outplayed them. But I mean, when it comes down to backyards, it really, I mean, it's cliche, but it really does come down to, if like you have two equally matched people physically, it just comes down to who wants it more, and durability. I mean, that's like the other big factor, is like who doesn't get hurt.
Yeah.
Because I mean, it's like that could spring up any time on anyone, and like it's like, well, that sucks, because that's not how you want your race to end for either of them, really. For whoever continues and who gets hurt. So I mean, it sucks for both of them, but at the same time, like that's a huge factor in backyards. It's like your durability, and so I mean, that's part of the game, though.
Yeah, and your body physically pulled up pretty good after bigs.
So yeah, I've recovered pretty quick. So I mean, that's like part of the thing, like that gets me. It's like I don't know what went wrong. It's just like my legs just quit responding to me, but I'm afraid. I'm almost like afraid to admit it, but I think it was mostly just like mentally being done, just like mentally checking out. And so I honestly, I don't think it wasn't a physical problem. I mean, yeah, my legs, they didn't want to move anymore, but I mean, they had 250 miles on them. But I mean, I think if I had forced it, I mean, I know I could have lasted longer. I think it was just like the mental game was done. I checked out, and the part of the reason why I kind of like have come to, accept that is because it was like the last thing that kept me going was, I think it was about 2 yards or so before I quit, or before I timed out. I mean, whichever you want to say, it's a kind of a mix. But one of the things that kept me going for those last 2 yards was to better my PR. So I was like on 59 yards. I was like, oh, it's only a few more yards. I can do a few more yards and get to 62. And then it was the 63rd. Yeah, I was like, the body shut down. It's like, okay, you always hear the thing about like when you hit the finish line, then your mind knows and your body shuts down. And it seems like that's what happened to me. I had set a finish line for myself at 62 yards, and I hit that, and then it was like, okay, well, you're done, you made it. So
yeah, that's one of the things other runners have told me. They say, don't. One of the tips to run a high total is don't set yourself a target.
that's the advice I've given myself
Yeah.
every time. It's like don't set any distance. And I've told, and I tell that other people too, like when they do ask, it's like, don't set a distance. Don't say I want to hit 100, because then you're giving yourself an out when you hit that distance. And it's like, okay, well, you hit your mark. Now I get to quit. I achieved what I wanted to achieve. So that's where I'm like really hesitant about saying I want to run through a third night and that's my goal, because then I'm afraid when I do run through the third night, it's like, okay, well, you're done. So I always put that little add on there that I want to make it through a third night and then see how far I can go afterwards.
I do have a couple of questions from Instagram people.
Oh yeah. Yes, I saw the story there. I was wondering if any questions popped up. That's cool.
Yeah. So where you run, do you need to be careful of mountain lions and bears?
Not where I run. In South Jersey, I don't think we have any bears or mountain lions in southern New Jersey. I know in North Jersey there's black bears, but I don't think we don't see them this far south. So yeah, wildlife is the only wildlife I usually see when I'm running is like some deer.
Right. Yeah. I saw you post a photo of a snake a little while ago.
Oh yeah, I think that was on the course at Biggs.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, it was we went there and we set up, and after we set up, we walked the course, which I was like, oh crap, this course is gonna be tough. Yeah. But we ran across we saw a snake crossing the trail while we were hiking the course.
Have you got any races overseas races on your bucket list?
Oh, on my bucket list. Oh man. Well, I mean, those backyards, the one I saw in Germany, actually I'd like to do that one. And I mean, some of the Australian ones, the ones coming up in Australia, I mean, I don't know. I think it'd be really cool to do a backyard overseas somewhere. But otherwise, UTMB was always like, I don't know, I kind of, it used to, I would say it might still be a bucket list race for me. But I'm not sure how all of the qualification protocol has changed recently. So I think it's a lot tougher to get into now than it was a few years ago. Yeah. So I mean, honestly, I don't expect to ever run it as a race, but I'd love to be able to like just do the course like on my own and do it all in daylight, almost rather than doing the actual race.
It's taken off. Like it's so well known now. So so many more people would be trying to get into the field. That's for sure.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's from what I've heard, it's like it sounds really tough to get into now. And I guess another thing, like why I'd almost prefer to do it as like just a self like a fast packing trip or a multi-day trip is like I've just heard from like being a middle of the pack runner there that it's pretty crowded and you hit a lot of bottlenecks. So it almost seems like it'd be more enjoyable to me just to do it as like a self-paced run.
Yeah, fair enough. Also, now where do people need to go to read your blog and socials and stuff like that?
Yeah, so the blog is it's beastcoasttrailrunning.com. And then from there, there's links to all the socials like Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. But most of those are all some other version of Beast Coast Trail Running.
I see there's quite a few photos of your toenail situation going on.
Yeah.
It looks like your kids love it by the look of things. It's like,
oh yeah, that was the most recent one. Was last night. My 2-year-old. I was just standing at the kitchen counter eating some sweet potatoes, and he was like playing on the floor with some toys. And next thing I know, he's like picking at one of my toenails. I was like, what is going on down there? And then he's like, all of a sudden, he just like rips off my toenail that was apparently it had come pretty loose, but it's one of the ones that I had blister under from Biggs, and
Wow.
he just popped it off. It was like held it up to show it to me. It was like, I got your toenail. But yeah, the toenail thing, it's funny because like when I first got on YouTube, one of the first videos I posted was like was pulling my toenails off after my first 50 miler.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm not doing anything with YouTube. I'll just post these stupid toenail videos. And it was like they went kind of viral like for a while. Like all these people were watching videos of my toenails getting pulled off. I was like, are people into this? Like, so I kind of just went with it.
Yeah, very good. Hey, thanks heaps for joining the podcast, Scott. It's been a really fun conversation, I reckon.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Yeah, thanks for having me on, David.
No worries. All the best between now and Christmas and the New Year's, and I'll be watching what you're doing, and we'll keep in touch.
Yeah, all the best to you as well, and good luck at when your next backyard is coming up. Push through and make it through that second night.
Yeah, you've given me some good tips. I'll tag you in it in my result.
All right, cool. Yeah, I'll follow. I'll be following along probably.
Yeah, cool. All right, thanks, Scott.
All right, hey, thank you, Dave. Have a good one.
Yeah, you too. See ya.
See ya.
If you like this podcast, it would be awesome if you could like, subscribe, comment, share, all of that kind of stuff. Hope you enjoyed the episode and have a good one.